CFO's presentation on recruiting board members. My name is Sabrina Hauser. I am the owner of Capital CFO, and I'm joined with two of my directors today, Liz, who is our Director of Human Resources, and Katie, who is the Director of Nonprofit Management, both of which are also CEOs of their own nonprofits. So this is us, Capital CFO. We outsource bookkeepers as well as chief financial officers for mid-sized companies and nonprofits that need the expertise, just not necessarily full-time. We also help people with recruitment for their business and nonprofit, and we offer some consulting services for nonprofits that go above and beyond the CFO work that we do. And we'll dive more into those a little bit more towards the end. Katie will kind of go over all of the nonprofit services that we offer. I'm going to turn it over to Liz to do some housekeeping for us.
Thanks, Sabrina. So everyone who is attending can submit your questions and comments in the chat box anytime during the presentation, and we will try to address those as we go. And any questions that we don't get to during this webinar, we'll make sure to touch base with you afterward and address those directly. If you're calling in by phone and don't have access to the video portion, you can email questions to Katie at capitalcfollc.com, and Katie will be keeping an eye on her email, and we will address those questions as well. If you have any technical difficulties, just reach out to us in the chat box, where we will be monitoring that throughout the webinar. And finally, want to let you know that this session is being recorded, and we will provide recording and any backup materials that we talk about during the webinar to everyone after the webinar. So we'll get going.
Thanks, Liz. So today I'm going to walk you through some board development and strategic planning that I did when I was the CEO of a local agency. I'm going to take you through 3 different strategic plans that we did within the agencies, what worked, tweaks we could have made for it to work better, and then finally the one thing that we landed on that was gangbusters for us. And the reason I'm going to take you through all 3 is because, again, with some of the tweaks with the first 2, I think they could have improved a lot better. And the 2 approaches that I'm going to discuss first could certainly work for other nonprofits. For some reason, they just didn't resonate all that well with us, but they're certainly really, really good ideas. So for our first strategic plan, and this was a 3-year cycle, typically our strategic plan with my agency was every 3 years. Our board did what we called a targeted approach, and we targeted 3 different areas. We went after companies that we wanted represented on our board. We went after expertise that we felt that we were missing within the agency, and we went after demographics. So let me walk you through what that looked like. One second, I just need to move this. There we go. Okay, so for companies, each board member was asked to think of 3 to 5 companies that they wanted represented on our board of directors. The next step was that board development created a letter that was sent specifically to the company leaders that we all came up with. And then follow-up phone calls were to be made by both the CEO and the board members. In terms of expertise, we sent out an evaluation to our board members on what expertise they had, expertise that the agency was in need of. And then that helped us figure out what the gaps were. Again, this one's a little bit tricky because you certainly don't want to tap into a board member for staff resources, and you don't want them to become a staff member for you. But if there's an offshoot of something that you need, that isn't really a full-time person within your agency, it was a good way to figure out exactly what expertise we had on the board. So then whatever expertise we were lacking, so for example, for our agency, it was PR and marketing, that really became a focus of who to go after since that was something that we were lacking. And then companies were specifically targeted who had that expertise. And then in terms of demographics, in the same evaluation and survey that we sent to board members on their expertise, we also sent out an evaluation and survey that was conducted by our board development committee. So we listed out all the demographics and asked them to kind of fill in the demographics for themselves. So what counties they lived in, what counties they worked in, what their company was and what they did for that company, their gender, their race, and then any gaps that we felt that we had became a focus for us. We also worked, we served 4 counties with my agency, and we were part of all 4 chambers. So the third step in this demographics was that we worked with the chambers to try and fill gaps specifically in the counties that we were looking to serve. Okay, so in our first 3-year strategic plan, let's break down what worked and some lessons that we learned and tweaks we could have made. So with the letter that we sent out, one company got back to us right away. It was a company that the agency had a really strong relationship with, and they were touched by the letter, I guess, and they got back to us right away, and they gave us one of their employees. The company that did get back to us, they gave us a brand new hire. So it was a very young individual. This person didn't have very many connections, not only within their company, but really within their network, nor did they have the means that we were looking for, and they didn't have any of the skill sets that was part of that gap services that we did. Most board members did not participate in the brainstorming of the 5 companies that we were hoping that each board member could come up with a list of 5. So what really happened was that board development took this responsibility on. We created a list of 7 to 10 companies, and then board development went after those companies. With expertise, we sent out a survey asking what skill sets each board member had. We focused on things like HR, marketing, payroll, PR, fund development, and strategic planning. Once the survey was completed, the board development committee didn't follow up with what to do next and really didn't figure out how to fill those gaps. So this survey really became a lot more of a talking point for most of our board meetings, which in and of itself definitely has value. It just didn't yield to board members to fill that gap. So one thing that I think we could have made a little bit of a tweak is it would have been really helpful to combine the company list with the expertise list and see if there was any overlap, and to really share that list with our entire board as opposed to just the board development committee. And then the other thing that we could have done is we could have conducted kind of a circle of connections brainstorming session with our board members. So what we did as board development was we created this list of 7 to 10 companies to go after. We sent out the letters, we kind of dispersed between them who was going to make follow-up phone calls, but we never took that list back to our board and did this. We took the list back to the board, but we never went around and said, who in this room knows somebody from this company? And I think if we would have done that, it would have been much easier for the board members that we had to connect the company with the person and see if they could make the phone call to get a potential board member, or at least get somebody else that's in a decision-making power to help us get that board member. Demographics. So we sent out the survey, as we said, and we really broke it down by the company they resided in, their employer, their gender, their race, their languages spoken. The agency hosted a lunch with leaders of the community that were people of color to hear from them and listen and learn more about what they felt was equitable in our agency and what they felt was not equitable in our agency, and what barriers they felt were leading them to not want to be leaders within our agency. Once the survey was completed, again, our board development committee and our board didn't really know follow-up or what to do next with that information. And same thing with the luncheon, although it became a really great, valuable point of discussion, and we learned a lot. We just didn't know what follow-up steps to take right after that. And I think if we would have brought in an equity expert at that time to kind of talk us through how to go about this process, it would have just given us so much more value to know exactly what the steps are. And even if this lunch would have been a really good first step for us. So this was our next 3-year strategic plan. So that took about 3 years for us to cycle through. I think we enrolled 1, maybe 2 board members in that 3-year term. So the next strategic plan was what we called the board approach. So we asked each board member to create a list of 3 to 5 people they wanted to personally invite to the board. Each board member shared the list with the CEO, which was me. We created a chart, which of course was in Excel, because that's thanks to my soul. And then we shared that chart at every single board meeting and asked the board member that was connected to those list of people to give an update. And then part of the chart was notes that we took. So the notes were, this board member reached out in February and this was the conversation. So year 1, the lists were created. Most board members were really able to come up with a very long list of people to invite to the board. So most board members went above and beyond kind of that 3 to 5 year. Most board members attempted at least that initial call of people on their list. Some people on the list were absolutely known and within the network of that board member. Others were not, and just people that they heard of or had connections based on their current network. So somebody that knew somebody, but they really wanted to find a way to connect. So the result was year 1 was really spent circling over the same list of people and board members not doing much in between the board meetings and being like, oh yeah, I have to get back to so-and-so. I haven't called them since, 3 months ago and we haven't connected since. And then towards the end of the year, most people were just not reaching out and that list became almost white noise at the meetings. Year 2, we changed things up a little bit and we created what was called a board member of the month. So we, again, asked them to create this list. And then each board member in November of the previous year was told that they were going to sit in on 1 board development committee meeting. So each board member was assigned a committee meeting to attend for board development, walk through their list with the board development. Board development was going to be able to support them, give them resources, letters, scripts, whatever they needed. And then at the next board meeting, which our board met every other month, they would actually talk about their list and where they were with their list and what happened. So at every single board meeting, we had 2 board members. We were supposed to have 2 board members that were presenting their list of 5 people. So potentially 10 potential board members that we were discussing at that board meeting. So board members were told in November what their next year's schedule looked like. So they were told when they were going to be sitting in on the board development meeting, and they were told which month was going to be their board meeting in which they were presenting. We had some pitfalls with this. A lot of board members really canceled with a day's notice, and it was very difficult to reschedule them because, again, every single board member was already attached to a month. So it was really hard to get people kind of rescheduled. And then once they fell off, it was hard to get them re-engaged, even if we were trying to schedule a meeting that was maybe outside of board development. It was really hard to get 7 to 9 people to just commit to a meeting. So the result was in year 2, we had 1 new board member that was recruited in that process. Year 3. Okay, so this is the year that things started to finally come together and the pieces started to fit a little bit better for us. And I think that this idea came from probably a conference that I attended. So again, beg, borrow, and steal. I learned from people that are way smarter than me. So I believe that this idea came from at least a conference or a session that I attended. So this year three, was also when we were very heavy into what I call our powerful board. And if you don't know what that means, we did do a webinar session on creating a powerful board. So year three of this strategic plan is when we were really probably year four into our powerful board. And it was really starting to gel, and we were very much ready for recruitment, and we had a very clear vision for the board. We knew exactly what we wanted. The give get was not wishy-washy. And we could really present to board members, this is exactly what your time commitment looks like, your financial commitment looks like, your company commitment looks like. So it really started to gel a little bit. So with the recruitment letter, every board member, once again, was asked to think of a list of 3 to 5 people that they wanted to recommend to the board. They shared the contact info for that person and a brief introduction to the person, and not an introduction of, hey, Sabrina, here's John Smith. I'd like you to meet John Smith, or a quick write-up as to who the person is, where they work, who they are. I then created a recommendation letter that was sent out on behalf of the board chair. So our board chair actually physically signed all of these letters. And what this recommendation letter was, it was a nomination. So this recommendation letter went out to the potential board member, and it nominated that board member to come and join our board. And the nomination came from the board member who sent us the list. So it was mentioned in the letter who nominated them and why, because again, in the write-up, we asked, what would make this person a good fit for our board. So although it was a template letter, it was exceptionally personalized, because it would say something like, hey, Liz, Katie nominated you for these reasons. These are the reasons she thought that you would be a really good board member. So it made Liz, within the first 2 sentences, feel already special and engaged, and like, wow, Katie went out of her way and nominated me for this. And here's all the attributes as to why she felt I would be a good board member. So it resonated and made the people feel kind of special for being nominated. The letter included a packet of information. So in the packet, we shared our vision and mission of the agency and the board. We put right on there our board time commitment and monetary commitment. And then once those letters were sent out, so all the letters were sent out on behalf of the agency, but signed by the board chair. And then once those letters were sent out, the board development committee had a list of 10, 15 people that they had to make follow-up phone calls with. And then the result of this was that in the first 2 months, we had 5 board members that were already recruited and joined our board, 9 more that were interested, and meetings were set up. So we, within the first 2 months of year 3, were already starting to think of ways that we might have to cap our board, because this recruitment effort just resonated so well. Okay, so a couple of recommendations to kind of go over. So first of all, I think the biggest recommendation that I have is that the first several years that we tried this, and one of the reasons it just didn't work, is our board vision was a little wishy-washy. We didn't really have a very targeted give-get. We didn't have a definitive, this is how much time it takes to be on our board. We definitely knew the mission and the vision of the agency, but the board role was still a little squishy. And I think part of that, to be completely honest, was, in my first 2 years of being the CEO there, I was exceptionally green. And I think the board spent a lot of their time really mentoring, coaching, and working with me to ensure the sustainability and safety of the agency. And then as I started to get my feet under me, that dynamic needed to change a little bit. And as I was stepping much firmly into a CEO role, they then needed to step back into their board role. but it had been a couple of years and it was a little squishy. So it was like, oh, what is it that we really do? So that would be my very first recommendation is when you are ready for board recruitment, you need to be ready for board recruitment. You really need to know what is it that you want board members to do? Does the full board feel this way? What is the vision for the board? What are they going to be working on? And that can differ from agency to agency, but you really need to have a very clear focus of what a board member is going to look like for your agency. And then you want to really carefully vet your prospects. So you want to find out from your board what would make an excellent board member. If they could have their perfect board member, what would he or she look like? What gaps do you have that you need filled? Do you need to do evaluations and surveys of what those gaps are? And then you need to do a lot of planning. So this letter and packet that I created, and again, we will share templates with you, but it and tracking mechanisms, like all of that, are all these little details that you kind of have to have in place before you put out this net of people. Who's doing the tracking, who's accountable to what, who's doing follow-up phone calls, because the more accountability spread out and the more people have to check back in, the much more likely that they are to actually have to follow through. And then communication. So you really want to communicate with your monthly board development meetings. You want to keep them accountable to their task, especially because board development is responsible for that. They're responsible for the development of your current board members and the recruitment of upcoming board members. Does that mean that they're the only ones that are responsible? No, but that means that that is what their focus is. And again, every single board member is responsible for all of the committees, right? Like as a board member, I can't say I'm on board development, so that's all that I'm responsible for. I'm responsible for all of it. But as board development, I'm taking the lead in that charge. And I am now bringing that to the board to say, this is what we need from you board members, and I'm taking on the accountability piece of this charge. Same thing with fund development. You know, if I'm sitting on the fund development committee, that doesn't mean I have nothing to do with board recruitment or board development. It's just that my lead is showing board members what we need to be done for fund development and being accountable and holding some sort of tracking mechanisms for that. So what would be the right option for your nonprofit and what direction do you go in? So first, and I think I talked quite a bit about this, you really want to establish your goals. Start by meeting with your board and specifically your board development committee and understand what your 3-year goals are, because none of this is going to happen, you know, in year one. And even with a couple of those tweaks that we made, you know, our first 5 years of doing this would have looked a lot different. And we didn't go back and retweak. What we kept doing was just scratch it and moved on to the next thing. 2 perfectly fine ways to go about it, like, hey guys, this didn't work, let's just move on to the next. Or could we make a couple of tweaks and try this again? You really kind of need to decide with your board and your board development committee which way you want to go. Accountability. Who on the board or who in the agency will be the one responsible for holding all others accountable? Who's going to be taking the lead on the plan and breaking out the work to make it easier for the volunteer? And then you really want to determine the amount of time it's going to take and break it out over the course of every 3 to 4 months checking in. I think if we would have done that, if we would have taken this quarter by quarter, I could have easily said to the board, quarter one, we have 1 board member. How are we feeling about that? Do we feel like this is a really good solution? Should we make tweaks and adjustments now instead of waiting until the end of the year when these lists really just kind of became white noise? And then set some short and long-term goals for yourselves to keep yourselves on track. So why is this important? I think as agency leaders or anybody that's been part of any nonprofit in any way, so direct service, management, administrators, board members, does not matter. Board members is one of the most crucial pieces of any nonprofit. It is a partnership between the board and the CEO and the executive director, but it's a partnership in which the board is also supervising, managing, evaluating, hiring, and firing that role. Your board members steer your agency towards sustainability. It is their main function and purpose. And they serve as leaders and donors for your organization. And more importantly than that, they're your advocates. They're the ones that are on the streets, and they're the ones that are talking about your agency with their companies, their network. They're your sales force. And what they are bringing to the table is exceptionally important. And you want to make sure that it aligns with what the CEO, agency, and board chair want. That's why that partnership is so crucial. Okay, so here are some questions that you might want to ask potential board members, and also be aware that potential board members are going to be asking questions of you as well. So one of the questions is, do they have the capabilities, skills, and expertise that you're looking for? Why do they want to join a board? And most importantly, why do they want to join your board? There are definitely people that have to join a board because their company forces them to. That is perfectly acceptable. It's a great way for a company to give back to their community. But this board member is choosing your board. Sort of all the agencies out there, they're choosing you. Why? Do they have a good reputation? Do your due diligence on them. Figure out, what it is that they are into and what they support. What other boards have they been on, and what other boards are they currently on? And if they're on multiple boards, how are they going to differentiate your agency from the rest of the boards that they're on? And are the other boards get boards? Are they expected to fundraise for those other boards? If so, you can definitely ask them, how do you see fundraising for 3 different, agencies? And how do you not see an overlap and burnout in that? And then, do they work for a company that would support them and support this experience with your board? Before I get on to the next one, they will also ask you questions, and questions like, can I see your board list? Can I see your financial plans? Can I see board meeting minutes? Can I see some committee meeting minutes? Can I see a list of committees that you have and what they do? Because they're trying to do their due diligence also. And they might ask questions like, where were you 3 years ago as opposed to where you are now? Where do you see yourselves in 5 years? How do board members help get you there? What is a board member's role? As a board member, what am I expected to do? One of the most frequent questions I got is, how much time? How much of my time is going to be expected to do this? So just make sure you have those questions, in your head to be able to answer as well. So the tools and resources that we're going to be sharing with you today is I will share with you the nomination form. We'll also share with you the letter, the nomination letter that went out to potential board members. And the packet of information, so you can see that if that is an area that you want to go with, you can certainly use that information to start going in that direction. The other resources that we used was our chambers, and we did use the 40 by 40 list to really help and reach out to those people who got I think it's the Albany Business Review that does the 40 under 40 and the 30 under 30. So one area of caution is these are up and coming individuals in their fields. So depending on where you are, if you're looking for somebody in middle management, upper management, just keep that all in mind. Again, it's a great way to look at the companies that are supporting them, because 40 under 40 lists are highly supported by their companies. And the other thing to keep in mind with those lists is they are inundated. So they're inundated with nonprofits that, are looking for them to join their boards or committees. And one thing that we definitely found with that list is they made exceptional committee members. This was like, committee members was the perfect way to engage 30 under 30 and 40 under 40. It was a great way for them to dip their toe into leadership without really going full force ahead. It was a great way for them to figure out, like, can I do this? And do I have the time? Do I have the expertise? And then once they were on a committee for a year or two, board service was no problem for them. So it's a great way to funnel people from committee work to board service very easily. So I think I rambled on long enough. And I'm going to turn it over to Katie and Liz to see if we have any questions in the chat box or to open it up for questions now.
That was going to be my recommendation. We don't have any questions that came in throughout the duration of your presentation, but we are willing to open up the lines if you'd like to ask a question to Sabrina or any of us directly. I think you have to request, or I can allow you to talk. So you would still be muted. But if you would like, you've been added to potentially participate if you would like.
No questions? All right, Katie, I'm
I'm
going to turn it over. Yeah, I was so thorough. Katie, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk through some of the nonprofit services that we offer.
Absolutely. Well, we do have this very helpful slide to show you some of the services that we're able to offer nonprofits. And of course, this is not an exhaustive list. We really have a focus on creating strategies to help nonprofits once we learn a little bit about what you're doing and where you're going. So we will create customized solutions, but among that we do strategic planning, which would include a strategic plan and action plan, the entire process in developing a strategic plan, which of course is a huge piece of any nonprofit. Board development, of course, related to our conversation today, supporting board member recruitment as well as training. We can also offer interim ED and transition planning for those nonprofits that are experiencing a transition in leadership. We have a number of trainings and workshops that we can offer, this being just one of them, but fund development, budgeting, governance, impact assessment, and more. We're also able to offer grant research, grant writing, grant calendars, and more if you have a need and don't have a grant writer on staff. And then outreach and communication. So we can help you create some messaging to support your board development, your board recruitment, as well as messaging and elevator pitch, speech writing, PowerPoint presentations, and more. So we really do try to be a one-stop shop for nonprofits. And if we don't do it, we certainly know who to connect you with. And so we are here to support you because we believe that nonprofits face challenges, and so we offer solutions.
And then this is how you can get a hold of us. Our telephone number is down at the bottom, and that is our email addresses. And that's our website too, which will be able to have you guys see all of the services that we do offer. And then on the very home screen of the website, all the way down at the bottom is our YouTube channel that has all of these webinars recorded and uploaded. So if there's a webinar that I discussed today, like, creating a powerful board, that's where you can go and review those webinars at your convenient time for you. All of our webinars offer free resources, templates that we share with people. So never hesitate to reach out to Katie. She has all of those templates. So if there's something in a webinar that you would like a copy of, just let her know.
Hey, Sabrina.
Yes, ma'am.
There is a question that came in on the chat box before we leave.
Okay.
Kim, and she asks, is there a ratio or formula for board size?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know if there's a ratio or a formula. I do know that when I started with my agency, we had a cap. So I think our cap was 30. We never got to 30, and we never wanted to get to 30. So once we hit our powerful board, we really wanted 20 to 22 people. That's how we felt was a very comfortable, manageable number. And did you say Kim had this question?
Yes. Yes.
So Kim, I think that is a great way for a leader of an agency and a board chair to have a discussion on what feels manageable, because the board chair, everything funnels up through to the board chair. And then as the leader, you have to manage kind of the entire board. So together, if you can kind of create a cap, and you maybe want that cap to be a little bit higher than what you normally have. But then figure out what is a strong manageable number right now. And that number can change year to year to year. When I first created a powerful board, we dropped down to 11. And we maintained 11 for a solid 3 years until we were ready to recruit again. And that was very manageable at that time because we were going through such transition that it was really kind of difficult and challenging to bring new people on while we were going through this, crazy transition. That number can change depending on what the agency and what that board is going through. I don't know of a specific formula. I'm sure that there is one out there that has to do with budgets, like how large your budget is and how large the agency is would determine how large the board is. And what I will do, Kim, is we'll do a little bit of research, the three of us, on that, and we'll send whatever links and information we find out.
I find in my experience that very similarly, it's a matter of getting a sense of what is manageable. Some of what I have found to influence that decision is committees and committee participation, what tolerance my board members have for participating on multiple committees. Because when my board was very small, I needed them on multiple committees to have enough committee activity. So I think that's part of what might be finding the ratio for yourself. Sometimes certain funding sources, they may not tell you how many board members you have to have, but they may have certain board composition requirements. And I've been involved in some organizations that require that you have representatives of the population that you serve on your board, for example. So that's always helpful to consider as well. And then just a reminder that your bylaws do determine and should outline your board number. So you determine that with the board and the board votes on it, but the bylaw should say, you aim to have 14 to 30 members at any given time. And they typically should outline a minimum number as well as a maximum number. Those are just a couple additional points.
Thanks, Katie. That was helpful.
Of course. Any other questions before we close?
All right, Kim, and we'll definitely get back to you to see if there is a specific formula out there. But any questions along the way, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We're happy to help. Thanks, everybody, for your time today. Have a good week.